One of our somebody asked, "Happy 9th Brexit Day. If the referendum was taking place today, would you now vote leave?" Jonathan Lang says, "Happy 9th Brexit Day, Robert. Would Mr. Jenrick vote for Brexit if it was indeed today?" That would be one.
Yeah, well, I certainly would do.
But
there's lots of people whose views have evolved over time. I mean, Bill Cash told me the other day that I was surprised about that he'd voted to stay in the European community.
Well, he voted for the Maastricht Treaty.
Exactly. Yeah. So there's definitely people who surprise you like that. Look, I always think this is a bit overstated. I didn't join the Tory party in 2010 under David Cameron. I joined the Tory party in 1997 in Wolverhampton, and there weren't many Conservatives in Wolverhampton in 1997. There certainly weren't many people who would be described as Cameroons back then. And even when I first stood for Parliament, which was when David Cameron was the Prime Minister, the Tory party then was a party which was trying to control migration. You know, not perfectly, but a hell of a lot better than it did later on in office. It certainly wasn't a Tory party that wanted to see 1 million people enter the country every year. It was a Tory party that was trying to reduce the size of the state with some success. Making some quite difficult decisions. I mean, look at the size of the civil service that was reduced and then allowed to spiral later on. I think a lot of the big problems of the Tory party came about in the recent years when the ministers at the time made absolutely catastrophic decisions, like to create the points-based immigration system, for example. But I tend to think that my own politics are rooted in the kind of places that I grew up in. You know, I grew up in Wolverhampton in the West Midlands. I now represent somewhere that's not totally different in the East Midlands, small town in Newark. My parents are both from working class backgrounds in Manchester and Liverpool, small business people. Those are my people.
Did the Home Office radicalise you? Did being at the Home Office... I think once you've seen the nature of the beast, did you actually start to think this system can't work, doesn't work, needs change?
Yeah, it did sharpen my views. I think John Hayes likes to say I was radicalised by the facts, and that there's some truth in that. But what I saw in the Home Office was an absolute disgrace. It was complete breakdown of our borders, and I made an effort to go and talk to people who that was actually affecting. You know, the people who live in the estate at the cliffs of Dover, who'd met asylum seekers, legal migrants who'd broken into the country and then turned up in their gardens or their kitchens. People who were completely understandably angry about asylum hotels in Peterborough and, you know, prestigious hotels that they'd had their golden wedding anniversary in or got married in, and yet were now being taken over by asylum seekers. And it left me with a sense that the state is broken, that many politicians and much of the media had shown complete disdain for people's views and had no idea of the practical, real-world effects of these policies on ordinary people across our country, and that things had to change. They absolutely had to change. And ultimately, obviously, I fought to change things with a degree of success. I mean, the small boat crossings fell by a third when I was the minister with Suella, and they've risen since dramatically. We managed eventually to persuade Rishi to put in place changes to the legal migration system that, as you can see, are starting to have some effect. But none of this was enough. And I got very, very angry that I felt I had an answer on both legal and illegal migration. I knew how to stop the boats. I knew how to get legal migration down to where it needs to be. And leaders were just not willing to do it. And even worse than that, they were talking the talk. We'll stop the boats, you know, now Starmer, we'll smash the gangs. They knew full well that their policies were never going to have the impact that they said they were going to. In fact, they were sticking two fingers up, really, to the British public, laughing at them behind the scenes. And I wasn't willing to go along with that. And so that did radicalise me. I felt that if I was ever lucky enough to be in office again, in whatever capacity, I was never willing to do that. I want to be a politician who actually says what I think, has an agenda, stands for something, and then if we're lucky enough to be in office, actually does it. And that is what people, I think, want right now from politicians.